The year is 1800. We stand at the precipice of a new world, gazing out over a landscape that is rapidly shedding its skin. To the untrained eye, the horizon of Lancashire still holds the memory of green fields and quiet market towns. But here, in Manchester, the earth itself seems to be groaning under a new weight. This is the dawn of the 19th century, and we are witnessing the birth of the first true industrial city the world has ever known.
Keep the line straight, lads.
It begins not with a shout, but with a low, rhythmic hum, the sound of the future being woven, thread by thread, in the belly of the beast. Look closely at the skyline. The medieval spires of the collegiate church are no longer the tallest points reaching for the heavens. Instead, tall, tapering chimneys of red brick are beginning to pierce the gray canopy of the sky. They are the new cathedrals, temples to commerce and cotton, and from their mouths pours a thick black incense that stains the clouds and chokes the sun. The air here tastes different. It is heavy, metallic, carrying the sharp tang of sulfur and the cloying scent of raw, unwashed wool and cotton. Even the rain, which falls with a relentless persistence in this part of England, does not cleanse the streets. It merely mixes with the soot to coat the cobblestones in a slick, black mire. As we walk through these early streets, notice the frenetic energy. It is a chaotic magnetism. People are pouring in from the countryside, drawn by the promise of wages, leaving behind the seasonal rhythms of the farm for the tyranny of the factory whistle. You can hear them before you see them. The clatter of wooden clogs striking the stone, a sound like heavy rain marking the shift change. They are Irish immigrants escaping poverty, rural laborers seeking fortune, and families displaced by the very machines they now serve. They crowd into the hastily built districts of Ancoats and Little Ireland, places where urban planning is an afterthought to profit. Here, the contrast is stark, almost violent in its disparity. On one street, we see the rising merchant class, men in tailored coats discussing the price of raw materials from the Americas, their eyes fixed on the global reach of their empire. They are building grand warehouses that look like Italian palazzos, monuments to their newfound wealth. But turn the corner, just a few yards away, and the facade crumbles. We descend into the cellar dwellings, dark, damp holes in the ground where entire families live in the twilight. There is no sanitation here, only the stagnant stench of the cesspit and the damp rot of the walls. Yet, in these early decades, there is still a sense of awe mixed with the horror. The steam engine is a marvel, a terrifying giant that breathes fire and pumps water. When the gas lamps are lit for the first time, flickering uncertainly against the gloom, they illuminate a city that is inventing itself in real time. The pace of life has accelerated. Time is no longer measured by the rising sun, but by the clock. As the first 20 years of the century grind forward, the initial optimism begins to sour into unrest. The machinery does not sleep, and it demands flesh and blood to keep moving. We see children no older than 6, their faces smeared with grease, slipping between the spinning mules of the cotton mills, their small hands risking destruction for pennies. The noise is deafening, a constant mechanical roar that vibrates in the teeth and settles in the bones. This is the heartbeat of Manchester in its youth, ambitious, cruel, and relentlessly loud. The foundation has been laid, the furnace has been lit, and as the smoke thickens, the city prepares to swallow the sky. Time moves forward, grinding through the decades like the gears of the very machines that now define this place. We arrive in the 1840s, the era often whispered of as the Hungry 40s. Manchester has ceased to be a mere collection of buildings. It has become a living, breathing organism, a vast, pulsating engine of the British Empire. The city has doubled, then tripled in size, swallowing the surrounding villages of Hulme and Chorlton, turning green pastures into endless grids of red brick and slate. If the air was heavy before, it is now a physical weight. Stand on the banks of the River Irwell. Look down into the water. It no longer reflects the sky. It is a sluggish, opaque fluid, running purple one day, indigo the next, depending on which dyes the textile mills have flushed out that morning. It bubbles with the gases of decaying matter, a chemical stew that winds through the city like a poisoned artery. There are no fish here, only the refuse of a million souls and the toxic runoff of the industrial miracle. Let us walk into the labyrinth of the working-class districts. The concept of personal space has vanished. We find ourselves in the back-to-backs, rows of terraced houses built so cheaply and quickly that they share a rear wall, preventing any cross-ventilation. The air inside is stagnant, recycled from lung to lung, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and coal smoke. In the courtyards between these dwellings, we see the single privy, an overflowing cesspit shared by 50, sometimes 100 people. The night soil men come only occasionally to clear it, their carts rattling through the darkness, but the stench is a permanent resident. Observe the people as they emerge for their brief respite from the mills. They are a new breed of human, physically shaped by the city. They are pale, their skin starved of sunlight, their stature stunted by malnutrition. Watch a family sit down for their evening meal. There is no roast beef of Old England here. The table holds a loaf of white bread, deceptively bright, whitened with alum and chalk to hide the poor quality of the flour. They drink tea, but it is weak. The leaves often reused or mixed with slow leaves. Butter is a luxury. Meat is a memory. This is a diet of fuel, not nourishment, just enough to keep the body moving for another 12-hour shift. Yet, amidst this squalor, there is a terrible, rhythmic order. The day is ruled by the factory bell. At 5 in the morning, the knocker-up walks the streets with his long pole, tapping on the upper windows to rouse the weary sleepers. The clatter of clogs on the cobbles returns, louder than before, a marching army of the industrial age. The noise of the mills is now so intense that workers have developed a form of lip reading to communicate over the roar of the power looms. But listen closely, beneath the mechanical thunder, there is a different sound rising, a murmur of dissent. The sheer density of human suffering is creating friction. In the taverns and the secret meeting halls, men are speaking of charters, of rights, of the value of their labor. We see the shadow of Friedrich Engels walking these very streets, notebook in hand, documenting the abyss with a horrified fascination. He sees what the factory owners in their villas ignore, that you cannot pile this much misery into one place without creating a powder keg. The divide between the masters and the hands has become a chasm. The city is rich, wealthier than any city in history, yet its creators are starving. The tension is palpable, vibrating in the air like the static before a lightning strike. The middle years of the century are not just a time of production. They are a time of pressure, building and building, waiting for a spark. The year is 1861, and suddenly the noise stops. After decades of a relentless, thundering crescendo, the clatter of clogs, the hiss of steam, the roar of the looms, the great mechanical heart of Manchester skips a beat and then falls into a terrifying silence. The smoke that has choked the city for half a century begins to thin. For the first time in living memory, the sun strikes the cobblestones without fighting through a veil of soot. The sky turns a pale, forgotten blue. But this clean air brings no joy. It brings terror. The clear sky is not a blessing. It is a shroud. Thousands of miles away, across the Atlantic, cannon fire has erupted between the American states. The Union blockade has closed the ports of the South, and the supply of raw cotton, the lifeblood of Manchester, is severed. The cotton famine has begun.
My chest hurts.
Walk through the districts of Ann Coates and Miles Platting now.
We shouldn't be out in
The difference is visceral. The factories, usually vibrating with heat and motion, stand cold and dark, like tombs of red brick. The chimneys, usually belching prosperity and poison, stand stark and empty against the clouds. The silence is heavy, pressing against the ears, louder in its own way than the machinery ever was. It is the silence of starvation. We see the human cost of this global conflict etched onto the faces of the Lancashire workers. These are proud people, skilled laborers who have defined themselves by their ability to work hard in hellish conditions. Now they are forced into idleness. We see men who once managed complex machinery, now humiliated, forced to break stones in the workhouse yards for a bowl of thin gruel. We see women stripping their homes bare, pawning the family Bible, the Sunday clothes, even the bedding, just to buy a crust of bread. The furniture disappears, piece by piece, burned in the hearth to ward off the damp chill of the English winter. The streets are filled not with the purposeful march of the morning shift, but with the shuffling of the destitute. They wait in long, winding lines at the soup kitchens, heads bowed against the rain. The smell of the city changes. The metallic tang of industry is replaced by the sour, earthy smell of unwashed clothes and the faint, sickly scent of disease, which always follows closely behind hunger. Typhus begins to stalk the silent rows of the back-to-backs. And yet, in the midst of this devastation, a moment of profound cinematic defiance occurs, a turning point of the human spirit. In 1862, at the height of their suffering, the workers of Manchester gather at the Free Trade Hall. They are starving. The Confederacy has offered to break the blockade and bring cotton and food back to their mills if only Britain will support the South. It is a choice between their own survival and the continued enslavement of millions in America. Imagine the atmosphere in that hall. The air is cold, the face is gaunt, but a resolve hardens in the room. In a letter to Abraham Lincoln, the working men of Manchester choose principle over bread. They pledge their support to the Union and the cause of emancipation, accepting their own hunger as the price of another man's freedom. It is a moment of staggering moral clarity amidst the grime. Lincoln replies, calling their heroism an instance of sublime Christian heroism which has not been surpassed in any age or in any country. As the 1860s draw to a close, the war ends, and the cotton slowly returns. The chimneys cough back to life, spitting black smoke once more. The noise returns. But the city that emerges from the famine is different. It carries a scar, a memory of the silence, and a knowledge of how fragile this industrial beast truly is. The machinery roars again, but the ghosts of the famine years linger in the shadows of the mills. As the century enters its final quarter, the city undergoes a metamorphosis of stone. The raw, chaotic energy of the early years hardens into an imperial majesty. Manchester is no longer content to simply be the workshop of the world. It now demands to be recognized as its master. We stand in Albert Square in the late 1870s, craning our necks to look up at the newly completed town hall. It is a Gothic mountain, a fortress of administration designed by Alfred Waterhouse. It is beautiful, but it is a dark beauty. The stone, though new, seems designed to absorb the soot, turning a deep, formidable black almost immediately, as if the building itself is camouflaging into the smoky atmosphere. Walk inside. The air here is cool and smells of beeswax and authority. The mosaic floors echo with the footsteps of the men who now rule this empire of cotton. On the walls, Ford Maddox Brown is painting murals that mythologize the city's history, turning the grime of the past into a heroic narrative. But step back outside, and the reality asserts itself. The wealth concentrated in this square is staggering, yet just a mile away in Angel Meadow, a district ironically named, we find what is described as hell upon earth. Here, 30,000 people are crammed into 1 square mile. The graveyards are so full that the ground is unstable. The living walk, literally, upon the shifting bones of the dead. The contrast is no longer just economic, it is existential. The city has split into 2 species, those who own the smoke and those who breathe it. As the 1890s arrive, the city performs its final, impossible trick of the century. Tired of the high taxes charged by the Port of Liverpool, the merchants of Manchester decide to do the unthinkable. They will drag the Irish Sea 36 miles inland. We stand on the banks of the newly dug Manchester Ship Canal. It is a scar across the landscape, a trench of water wide enough to float an ocean liner. Watch the surreal spectacle as a massive transatlantic freighter glides silently through the Cheshire Meadows, towering over cows and farmhouses. It is the ultimate triumph of the Victorian will. Nature has been totally subjugated to the ledger. When Queen Victoria herself arrives to open it in 1894, the cheers are deafening, a roar of pride from a city that has willed itself into being a seaport despite being landlocked. But as the century draws to its close, the mood shifts towards a twilight melancholy. The year is 1901. The old queen is dead. The era that bore her name, and which Manchester defined more than any other place on earth, is over. Stand one last time on the high ground of the Peak District, looking back down into the bowl of the city. It is evening. The gas lamps are being replaced by the harsh, buzzing white light of electricity. Electric trams are beginning to spark along the rails where horses once struggled. The skyline is a forest of thousands of chimneys, a solid block of industrial might. But the cost is laid out before us. The rivers are biologically dead. The air is a suspension of carbon. The lungs of its people are scarred. Manchester in the 19th century was the crucible of the modern world. It was here that humanity first made the pact with the machine. It was here that we learned how to produce unlimited wealth, and here that we forgot how to share it. We leave the city as the 20th century dawns, hearing the hum of the future, a future of speed, of steel, and of electricity, rising from the valley. The experiment is complete. The modern world has been built, forged in this fire, and we are all, for better or worse, the children of this smoke.